Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Jarvis, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 27 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one consulting services are available at no charge. Today's bootcamp, Futureproofing Your Business, Web 3.0, NFTs, and Blockchain, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. Be sure to check out our next digital bootcamp, Success Through E-Commerce, on June 28th. We are recording today's presentation and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted, but if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's session. Cameron Nelson is the Chief Digital Advisor for Virginia SBDC and Central Virginia SBDC. Mr. Nelson has over 18 years of experience in technology and as a senior tech consultant in Silicon Valley, helping Fortune 500 companies improve their digital marketing and e-commerce. At the same time, he founded several tech companies, including a software as service website for tree preservation and a blockchain platform for nonprofits. Cameron is accomplished in language, culture, has an MBA and MA, and believes new technology products have the ability to help shape our world for the better. Please join me in welcoming our presenter for today, Cameron Nelson.
Thanks for the introduction, and hello everybody. Welcome to today's bootcamp. I think this is a really exciting topic. We're going to be talking about future-proofing your business through some of these technologies that you've probably heard of, blockchain, what is Web 3.0, NFTs. I think this is really the future of technology, and in a lot of ways, it's the future of business online. So I think it's going to be really relevant, and I hope you get some good information out of this. I look forward to answering your questions at the end, and we should have 15 or 20 minutes for your questions. If I'm not able to get to your questions, then I'm always available with a one-on-one meeting, and you can email me directly, and we can set that up to talk about your specific use case for blockchain with your small business. So let's go ahead and get started. We have 5 main topics that I want to cover today. The first thing we're going to look at is what is blockchain and this term Web 3.0. Second, going to talk about how blockchain is useful for small businesses. Third, I'm going to look towards the future a little bit and try to help people plan out a roadmap for implementing blockchain to future-proof their business. Fourth, we're going to look at different industry applications. And fifth, we're going to tackle safety and privacy concerns around using blockchain technology in your business. So the first thing is, what is blockchain? Blockchain is a term that gets used a lot, and I know there's quite a bit of confusion of what blockchain is. So all of the words here in this word cloud are related to blockchain. You'll see blockchain is right here in the center. It's the biggest, but blockchain is really an operating system, and all these other things are like applications built on that technology. So a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or others is an application built on blockchain. Blockchain also handles NFTs, the non-fungible tokens that we'll talk about. And so blockchain encompasses a wide variety of things, but just keep in mind that blockchain is like the operating system. It's the technology that all these other applications run on top of. So that leads us into Web 3.0, which is a term that has been used a lot in the last 6 months to describe emerging services on the internet and emerging business types that are enabled with this new technology. So just to give a brief history, first there was what's called Web 1.0, right? This was kind of 1990 to 2005, the AOL days, where basic websites were the only thing that people used. Web 2.0 started around 2006, really with Facebook and Twitter and those social media platforms. And this really increased the amount of content being published. Anybody can comment on things that they see. Also, video streaming became a thing, and all these apps that our phones use run on Web 2.0. So now, what is Web 3.0? So Web 3.0 is built on blockchain technology. It enables more peer-to-peer type of, the second item here is called DApps, which stands for distributed apps. So this means there's not one organization like Facebook where you go to their website and interact with Facebook. But a distributed app is something that's spread out across many, many computers, and it's called peer-to-peer. So yeah, blockchain is enabling this kind of technology on the internet. And we see that in the form of the NFTs that are being sold. Also, augmented reality and virtual reality, the metaverse, is built largely on blockchain technology, and things like artificial intelligence and things like that. So Web 3.0 has been under development for a year or two, but it'll still be a few years before this is really replacing Web 2.0 websites. But this is the premise, and this is the promise that blockchain kind of brings to our discussion. So this is where we're going to be headed. And that's why it's important that businesses understand really what's behind blockchain and how they can use it. And that's what the goal of this presentation is. And one thing I want to talk about before I dive into how businesses can use blockchain is just to define Bitcoin and blockchain, because I get asked this a lot by small business owners. What is the difference here? So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, which is like an application that was built on the blockchain platform. The blockchain platform essentially is just a ledger, and that's why it's really handy to handle transactions of Bitcoin back and forth, because it keeps a record in a form of a ledger. The aim of Bitcoin is to simplify and increase the speed of transactions going around, international regulations or government restrictions. And the goal of blockchain is to provide a low cost and safe environment for peer-to-peer transactions. So that's the term again, peer-to-peer transactions. And that is really a key thing when we talk about removing the Facebook out of the social media platform, or removing the bank's website from banking. That's what the blockchain is for. That removes that need for that central authority. Bitcoin is limited to trading as just as a currency, and blockchain can transfer anything from currencies, property rights, stocks. We'll even talk about NFTs. It can transfer those. So blockchain transfers anything digital. And the scope of Bitcoin, therefore, is limited to its use as a currency, but the blockchain is really open. And like I said, it's more of an operating system that many different types of applications can be built on. And it has the backing of top companies. And we're going to talk about some of the main companies that are supporting blockchain and accepting Bitcoin in a moment. So next, I want to give some brief understanding of what blockchain is without going into too many technical details, because I'm sure not many of you are developers, so there's no need to get into the developer lingo here. So blockchain was first proposed as a research project in 1991, but it didn't really become famous until Bitcoin was built on it. And like I said, blockchain is a system of recording information on the ledger that makes it difficult or impossible to hack it or change it or cheat the system. And many blockchain applications like Bitcoin, they don't exist physically. So the premise of blockchain is that it's only an internet-based business. It's only running on the internet. And that's what the immutable blockchain is, running on the internet. Immutable just meaning it cannot be changed. It's kind of like if you were to carve a bunch of transaction details in a slab of stone, you can't go back and change it. And that's how the blockchain works as well. So what are some of the features of blockchain? Well, the first one is that it cannot be corrupted. One unique feature of blockchain is that every node or computer that has a copy of the ledger, the digital ledger, is checking it against the other nodes around the world. So the nodes help to safeguard that the data entered is correct. So essentially, if you were to transfer 10 Bitcoin to one of your friends or to purchase something, that is recorded in the ledger. And then everybody knows that it's gone from your possession to the possession of the person you transferred it to. The second is that it's a decentralized technology. So we hear about all the time how Facebook or a big website got hacked and a data breach happened and personal details were leaked or stolen. Blockchain doesn't have a central place that can be hacked. In fact, every single person running a node is essentially helping to be in charge and helping to maintain the security of the network. So it's much more proof against hacking like that. The third feature is improved security. So like I just mentioned, without having a central authority, no one can simply hack one website to reveal user data or to steal money or something. So it's much harder to cheat the blockchain. It relies on a digital ledger technology. And the ledger is just like the chain of records. And this is maintained by all the nodes, which is just a computer. It could be your PC at home or your laptop. You could be a node on the blockchain if you wanted. So you can be a node, and by having thousands of copies of the ledger, it ensures that there's transparency and traceability in all of the transactions. Because in order to make an update to the blockchain and enter a new transaction, you have to have a consensus. And that's the next part. The blockchain is run on an algorithm. And this is where the crypto comes into the cryptocurrency, because this is a cryptographic type of algorithm that uses mathematical formulas. And so what it means is that the nodes are constantly trying to figure out the answers to mathematical equations, and the answers are what enter data into the ledger. I know that might be a bit confusing, but I think that's the simplest way to explain it. Once 51% of the nodes have approved a transaction, then it's entered into the blockchain. So this is what's called approval by consensus. And this is why you don't need a bank saying, yes, the $1,000 Mike transferred to his friend John was actually transferred. The bank is being the central authority in that scenario, whereas in the blockchain, it's done by consensus. And the same type of transparency is still available. And the last feature is time and cost, because the blockchain offers faster and cheaper transfers of value than the traditional banking system. Because you can transfer a store of value in Bitcoin to somebody anywhere in the world within just a few seconds. And the cost of that is significantly less than transferring over a traditional banking system like SWIFT. So hopefully you're still with me here. And I just want to provide a quick example of probably the most common use of the blockchain. This is a Bitcoin transaction. So how it happens is the new transaction is entered. So let's just say somebody decides they want to transfer 1 Bitcoin to their friend. They enter 1 Bitcoin, they put in their friend's address. And then the transaction is transmitted to this network of peer-to-peer computers, also called the nodes, which are all over the world. And like I said, a node can be anything. It can be your PC or your laptop. Anybody can be a node. The network of nodes then solves this equation to confirm the validity. Again, 51% confirms it. And then once it's confirmed, it is clustered into a block, and the blocks are chained together to create the new link on the blockchain. And then finally, the recipient of that Bitcoin has received it. And this whole process usually just takes 30 seconds or so. So this is how the technology works. And one really cool way to visualize this is to see the transactions happening in real time. So what we're seeing here are the real-time transactions of Bitcoin all over the world. And as we watch, we see that they're updated constantly. These are real-time transactions, and this is happening 24/7, and it's been happening for years and years. You can see under the hash column, this big long string of letters and numbers. That represents the destination user or the address that has received the amount. We see the amount on the right in US dollars, so 5,000, 1,500. You'll see transfers of millions and tens of millions and even hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin here. And so I just wanted to show that this is a real dynamic thing that's happening right now and happening all the time. These transactions are happening, and this is looking right at the blockchain for Bitcoin. And there's many other blockchains that are out there doing the same thing for different purposes, not just money. So let's jump back over to our presentation. So now that we understand how blockchain works and the main use case there with the Bitcoin transaction, let's talk about how small businesses can use blockchain. The first one is by integrating a cheaper form of payment. So if your business wants to accept a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, you can save money. And I'll show you about how much money you can save versus traditional credit cards. Second, businesses can leverage smart contracts. So smart contracts are another application built on the blockchain platform that's a self-verifying and self-enforcing type of contract, and it's all kept within the blockchain ledger. And so this is a way that you can create kind of automated processes and self-executing contracts without the need of having as much overhead or administrative kind of oversight of the process. And I'll explain how it works in a moment. Third, businesses can use blockchain for raising capital. So blockchain has become very popular with ICOs and other types of blockchain capital offerings to raise money. So if you're a startup and you want to raise some funds to launch your product, you could go traditional investing, angel investors, you could get a loan from a bank, you could do Kickstarter, but blockchain offers another alternative, which can be really compelling in some situations. And lastly, blockchain can bring new customers to your existing small business. So there's some studies that show that blockchain Bitcoin holders and holders of other cryptocurrencies, their main blockage to spending that is that not enough stores accept it. So we'll talk about how you can accept Bitcoin and kind of what sort of increase in sales you might expect to see from that. So the first item is integrating a cheaper form of payment. A lot of small businesses that are selling goods and services online are paying a credit card processing fee. Here's a couple of examples. Square is a very popular one. They charge 2.6% plus 10 cents per transaction. PayPal is another very popular option, 2.9% and 30 cents. So you can see this is significant, especially over a long term, like a year. So the cost of accepting payments on in a cryptocurrency on the blockchain. So there's a couple options. BitPay is one. They charge a 1% transaction fee only. And they, what they can do is you can insert some code onto your website that says pay with cryptocurrency, and BitPay will take that, it will convert that, and it will give you the US dollars, all for a 1% transaction fee. And it integrates with QuickBooks and Shopify in case you're using those. So it can be an easy way to start using cryptocurrency. Coinbase is another good option. Coinbase is the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the United States, which means it's the main way people will buy and sell and trade cryptocurrency. And they've recently released their own solution for small businesses. So they will also give you a button on your website that lets people buy your goods with the cryptocurrency. Coinbase currently charges a 0% transaction fee, making it a really cost-effective way to start using cryptocurrency. And as of earlier this year, Visa partnered with Coinbase to offer cryptocurrency payments to merchants. So even the big credit card processors like Visa, MasterCard, Discover, they realize that there's a threat to their business model with crypto, and they are trying to figure out how to partner with these other players like Coinbase and BitPay. So you're going to see more and more of this. And so if you, enable this on your website, your e-commerce store, or your physical store, then you can see some pretty significant cost savings over time. You might be surprised at some of the very large companies that already accept Bitcoin as payment, like Microsoft, Home Depot, Whole Foods, Wikipedia, Overstock, Virgin Airlines, and some nonprofits like Save the Children. So I just wanted to show that, yes, it is a new technology. It is still being improved and worked on. It is not 100% stable and secure, but that hasn't stopped a lot of companies from using it. And I think for good reason, because a lot of people feel like it is the future of finance. So, if you do decide to accept it, you'll know here that you're in with pretty good company from these major companies who have also decided that it's worth going into. Now, the second advantage I talked about for businesses are using smart contracts. So this is a way to use the blockchain technology to remove the need for like a third-party administrator or evaluator when fulfilling a contract. And so what you would do is you just, work with a developer to write the code for the contract, and this would be then placed on the blockchain. You would set your predefined rules beforehand. So it might be you receive a shipment of items from a distributor, and then you want to pay that distributor. So as opposed to having to manually, visually inspect things, go to a computer, initiate a transfer US dollars to a bank account, type in a bunch of information. You could have this written into a smart contract where when you scan a barcode, the payment is automatically distributed to the suppliers according to predefined conditions. So this can be a good way to automate and automatically enforce certain aspects of businesses. Smart contracts work really well with digital assets, but can also work with physical goods. Like I said, if you have a barcode to scan, that can trigger the smart contract and the payment can be distributed. Smart contracts are not by default a legally binding contract, but the states have agreed that they can become legal contracts when you meet the local and federal legal standards. So you can work with a lawyer and actually make smart contracts legally binding. And there's a lot of benefits. You can reduce the cost and the time of things like negotiation and enforcement of contracts. It'll provide a high level of transparency and security and minimize third-party involvement and those associated costs of fulfilling contracts. The next aspect of using Bitcoin for small businesses and startups is by raising capital. So this is typically called blockchain-based capital offerings. There are three main types that I'll talk about here. The first one is I call the ICO, initial coin offering. It's the oldest, and it was most popular in the early days of the digital asset boom, which is around 2017, 2018. You don't sell equity in your company to raise money through this, but you sell a digital asset called a utility token, which is not associated with equity, but it gives some sort of use with your company. So let's just say you're a social media platform like Twitter, and one of the things people can use your tokens for is to like or favorite posts or share posts. So people can acquire these tokens during your ICO at a reduced rate, which will then fund your company to build your products, or they can require them later at a higher cost. So they're incentivized to buy them early during your ICO and help you fund your development of your company. Now, the next one is a security token offering, which is different from the ICO because the offering is for the purchase of a security rather than a digital product. And therefore, investors would get equity. So this is a little bit more traditional type of ownership of a company for investment money. And a type that's become popular since 2019 is the initial exchange offering, because a lot of startups got into a gray area with the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, by violating rules that didn't really exist yet when doing ICOs, and they got fined. So nowadays, companies like to partner with an exchange like Coinbase to help them do an offering, because Coinbase knows all the rules, and essentially the companies have less risk there. So that's another option. Certainly not the pathway for all small businesses and startups, but it is something to be aware of, that this is an alternative, especially to crowdfunding like a Kickstarter campaign. Fourth item is bringing new users to an existing small business. A couple of years ago, a survey of 35,000 cryptocurrency holders showed that those who spent showed that many of them spent their cryptocurrency on goods and services. The largest majority spent between $1,000 and $10,000, 32%, and falling off dramatically for things over $10,000. So if you are looking to attract new customers to your good or your service, your product, then enabling the payment through cryptocurrencies can help these people who have cryptos find a place to spend them. 76% of people surveyed said that they intend to spend their cryptocurrency to buy things, whereas only 14% said they were just for investment purposes. And the main takeaway was that if more places accepted cryptocurrency, more people would spend it there. So think about it as giving you a first mover, an early mover advantage here over your competitors, which is why I'm sure Microsoft and Overstock and Virgin Atlantic, these companies have decided to accept cryptocurrency because they have a lot of competition and they're looking for every advantage possible. As well, I think as most small businesses should be keeping an eye on this angle too, because it can give you a key advantage early on. Now, one very popular topic as relates to the blockchain is what's called non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of NFTs, so I'll talk a little bit about what they are and how they can be useful. NFTs are all unique, and each one has a digital signature that makes it impossible to be exchanged for another one. So like, $1 looks like another dollar, and if you gave $1 to somebody and they gave you your dollar, it would all be the same. But NFTs are not like that. Even if there were two NFTs that were for the same digital picture, each one is going to be unique. And so NFTs are kind of for collectibles and things that people value and think that they might want to sell someday or trade, because each one is unique. And so there's a lot of use cases for NFTs. Everything, and the most popular one is probably artwork, graphic art or digital art. We've seen examples of these selling for tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars because people like the piece of artwork. So they buy the NFT, which shows that they own that piece digitally. And they feel like that's going to go up in value, or they just really like the art. Also being sold are animated GIFs, which are essentially animated graphical art pieces, even video clips. So things like sports highlights, are like a famous touchdown and things like this. These are going for a lot of money because you can essentially own the rights to that clip digitally on the blockchain. Some people like that. It also has a big use case in video games, things like avatars or video game items, because you can say you own the only one of those in this video game with an NFT, digital music, and things like even event tickets. So anything that is able to be purchased online and that is going to be unique, and there's only going to be one of that exact one, can be made into an NFT. And so there's several different ways to make your own NFT if you're in the business of selling one of these types of products. This is one of the easiest ways. So Shopify, which is a major e-commerce platform for selling physical goods, about 6 months ago decided to jump on the NFT bandwagon and help people mint and create their NFTs. So here at the bottom is a link where you can do that. It's just shopify.com/NFT. And Shopify will issue your NFT on Ethereum, which is the world's largest blockchain. And there's other blockchains you could use for NFTs, but Ethereum is, in my opinion, the biggest and the best, so there's no reason to use anything else right now. And again, these tokens can represent anything like digital art, animations, music videos, tweets, and more. So if you're at all interested in trying to, increase your sales with your digital products, if it's one of these types of things through NFTs, and I encourage you to check out Shopify. Reach out to me if you have any questions. It's an interesting topic, and I'd love to help out if I can. So I think with any kind of technology, it's important to understand where it might be heading for businesses to kind of plan accordingly. So this is just a little bit of history and where it could be heading. Blockchain started in the 90s, but there was a lot of legal and technical challenges that had to be overcome. And these were mostly overcome by 2017, when Bitcoin started to become more popular, and companies like some of the early adopters that looked into it were IBM, Visa, and Delta. And they started using blockchain in their finances, operations, and logistics. And more people started investing in Bitcoin and spending it in goods and services. By 2018, we really saw small businesses and startups start using blockchain for raising money in initial coin offerings, and start building services using smart contracts and accepting cryptocurrency payments. Just 2 days ago, there was a news story I read about the US Congress. A couple of Congress people put forward a bill on how to regulate cryptocurrencies. So future looking, governments are very interested in this technology. They're hesitant to regulate it too strongly because they don't want to dampen the innovation happening here, but they also don't want there to be scams or frauds and things like that. So going forward, the governments are going to pass laws and bills to help solidify, how does blockchain and how do cryptocurrencies work with existing systems. This is going to be good because there'll be less room for scams and internet piracy and things like that. And traditional banks will slowly be displaced by blockchain financial systems. I mean, already there are people and families and entire countries that are using cryptocurrencies as opposed to US dollars or another fiat currency. Take, for example, the country of El Salvador, which you might have heard about a year ago made Bitcoin legal tender in the country. So along with their traditional currency, it was the US dollar, Bitcoin is legal tender in El Salvador. So this is a really innovative move for the country, and we'll see how it works out. But the goal is that they can be less reliant on the international banking system. So that's the future of where the technology will be used and how it'll change people's lives. And I think that if we look in 5 or 10 years, the businesses that have failed to understand and adapt to this technology and adopt it are going to start losing out to those who have successfully integrated it, know how to use it, and are on board with blockchain and the cryptocurrencies and NFTs and everything else. So that is the risk to businesses that ignore this, but it's also the opportunity for everybody here today to learn about it, get your questions answered, and hopefully find some ways that you can start improving your business. Now, blockchain can be used across so many different industries, and this is just a few where there's concrete examples of it being used. Everything in banking and finance, which is probably the biggest use case, to transportation and software development, global currencies, business operations, communication, remote working, property records and supply chain, healthcare, and voting. And in fact, one interesting piece of information is the country of Estonia was the first country 3 or 4 years ago to convert their whole nationwide voting system to running on the blockchain. So pretty cool stuff that voting is even happening there. So there's a lot of different industries and use cases. So is the blockchain secure? Are cryptocurrencies secure? This is a really good question, and I'm going to do my best to answer it here. This is a large topic, so there's some details I won't have time to get into, but overall, there's 4 main things you should be aware of. Now, there are some risks with the technology. The first one is what's called a 51% attack. So you might remember from the beginning of my presentation, I said that the nodes on the network have to have a consensus of 51% before a transaction is entered into the blockchain ledger. So in theory, that if somebody or some group has control of 51% of the nodes, they can create any kind of fake entries they want, and they'll be recorded. So they could essentially steal money or create money out of thin air for a while. And in 2018, it's estimated that $20 million was lost due to this issue. Is it a really big issue? Not super big right now. Seems to be the understanding among top computer scientists and government regulators. However, with the advent of quantum computing, people are concerned that a quantum computer could rapidly solve these algorithms and maybe make possible 51% attacks. But we're not there yet. Quantum computers are not a thing like that right now. So just something to be aware of possibly for the future. A second is social engineering. And in this type of security breach, somebody will obtain your private key, which is essentially your password for transferring your cryptocurrency, or your login directly. What they're going to do is send you an email or a message or something on social media, and they'll try to get you to provide that information. So this is not unique to the blockchain. This happens with any kind of scammer, but it is also a risk happening on the blockchain. If you were to give up your private key or login information, your assets, your blockchain, your crypto could be at risk. The third is that third-party vendor vulnerability. BitPay, Coinbase, all the companies that have sprung up to help people interact with the blockchain in various ways, even like Shopify with their NFT minting service, you can consider them third-party vendors. If they have a weak security, if they have a data breach, flawed code, or a personal vulnerability, it can expose your cryptocurrency or your NFT to hackers. So it's something to be aware of. It's not unique to cryptocurrency or blockchain, but it is a risk here as well as with the rest of the internet. And the last one is poorly tested code. As there's a big rush to create new services helping people use blockchain and use crypto. A lot of shortcuts have probably been made, are being made, and this results in, not proper testing in a lot of ways. So how can you, mitigate this risk? How can you know you're using a website that has good code that has been properly tested? I would say look for providers of services that have been around the longest. If there's one that's been around 6 months and one that's been around 3 years, maybe it's a cryptocurrency exchange, I would recommend you go with the one that's just been around the longest, because they've just had more time to work on their code and work out vulnerabilities and poorly tested code. So these are the main issues with blockchain security. And I think that by taking some proper precautions and just understanding them, that it does make the technology not very risky, not much more risky than using online services in general nowadays. So with that, I hope that this was useful information, at least to get you started on that journey of understanding blockchain and understanding how to start using it. I'm happy to answer your questions now for the next 20 minutes or so. And then also you can email me directly. We can set up a one-on-one meeting if you'd like, and we can talk more about your questions. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Cameron. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A box over here, and we will try to get to it. So the first one is, are there incentives or tax credits to use crypto payment gateways for businesses? Seems Bitcoin is still volatile and still in a bear market. Is there a way to compensate employers for when it dips, best to convert to stable coin like USDC after receiving crypto payments?
All right. Yeah, I think I heard 3 questions there, but those are great questions. The first one is, are there tax incentives to accepting payments in Bitcoin for your business? No, there are not. It's exactly the same from the IRS's point of view. You're still going to report that income. They're still going to expect you to pay the same taxes. So that is exactly the same. The second question was about the volatility of Bitcoin. Yes, Bitcoin is volatile. A year ago or 8 months ago, its value was $60,000 for one Bitcoin. Now it's around 30. So this is one of the biggest problems businesses bring up, is like, well, if I accept Bitcoin and in a couple of months, what if it's worth less? That hurts my operations. It does, absolutely. So a couple of ways you can mitigate that is, if you get some Bitcoin for a sale within, if you think it might be going down, you can just sell it for US dollars and put those in your bank account, right? And that would mitigate that risk. Also mentioned is you could convert your Bitcoin to a stable coin like Tether. A stable coin is a cryptocurrency that its value is pegged 1-to-1 to the US dollar. So these are not supposed to go down in value. So yeah, you can do that too. So those are your 2 options. However, you might get some Bitcoin at $30,000 and it might go up to $60,000. So you never really know. But yeah, if you don't want to speculate, then you can convert it to US dollars or a stable coin, which value should not fluctuate.
Great, thank you. Is it possible to utilize the benefits of blockchain for a small IT firm and avoid using cryptocurrency?
I think so, for sure. If you don't want to use cryptocurrency, you could have some smart contracts to help you automate certain parts of your business. Maybe you have client onboarding, or you have employee contracts or other legal documents you would like stored in a smart contract. So that could be an option. Yeah, if you're a service provider business, the smart contracts are typically what you'd look at. Possibly also NFTs, if you were selling some sort of a digital product, that might be an option for you to utilize the blockchain as well.
Great, thank you. This person says, I love the concept of possibly using or developing blockchain tech for a business loyalty program similar to Socios.com. Do you see companies minting their own coins to spend for special discounts, access to premier levels of service, etc.?
There's not a lot of that happening. If you remember on the slide that showed the companies accepting Bitcoin, those 10, as far as I know, none of those have created their own cryptocurrency to support their internal operations or, to give to their customers for anything. But it's not to say that it's not happening on a smaller scale with startups. I think in a lot of ways that's being explored. So I think you had mentioned having a rewards program. Yes, I know that there have been some ideas around that, but there's nothing that's running at scale right now. Those kind of rewards programs are still running on more legacy systems, airlines points or hotel points or whatever. I don't think any are on the blockchain yet, but that is an industry that's probably pretty ripe for disrupting with this technology.
Yeah, I've seen a couple credit card companies that will give you rewards, like your kind of cash back in crypto, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's new.
Yeah. How much, I think this one might require some clarification on what exactly you're asking, but this person says, how much do you have to pay into it?
Yeah, I think I don't know how to answer that. So yeah, just let me know what the it means would be helpful. Thank you.
Wouldn't you get hit twice if converting crypto to US dollar? One, a depreciating dollar, and two, paying taxes at the end of the year for bringing it back to your checking account?
If you make income, then you're going to pay taxes on that at the end of the year. Yes, but you'll pay the same taxes whether or not it's you have the Bitcoin or the US dollars at the end of the year. You still have to report earnings that have been made in a cryptocurrency. You do pay a small conversion fee. So what is it? I think on Coinbase, which is the largest exchange in the US and one of the better places to do an exchange like this on, I think their fee is 0.15%, something like that. So it's not a huge fee. In fact, this is much cheaper than a credit card fee or something like that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thanks. I don't have any open questions right now, but while we have a chance, I'm going to go ahead and launch this webinar evaluation. If everyone who's here, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to fill this out, it helps us out. And I have another question. How do you find and evaluate professionals like accountants and advisors with a specialty in crypto?
That's a good question. I think a lot of accountants and CPAs and financial advisors have been getting literate on cryptocurrency in the last few years, but certainly there's a wide range of understanding there. And it's particularly hard because, like I said, the US government is still years away from having firm rules and laws about cryptocurrency. So things change a lot. So how do you find someone who advise you on that from a financial point of view? You can ask your current person you work with how much they know about it, and hopefully they're just upfront and honest. But it's a really tricky thing to say exactly how you would find the best people, because somebody might be on top of the ball this year, and next year things have changed and they didn't stay up with it. So it's an evolving thing. I would say the best thing you can do is, and what I've tried to do, is become literate yourself. You might notice things, and you might know things that your accountant just does not know, and though you can bring those to their attention, right? There's a lot of changing and shifting regulations all the time. So I would, if you're interested in this subject, I would dedicate some of your time to kind of being an expert.
Great, thanks. This other one's just a comment. Thank you so much, Cameron. This is very helpful. I appreciate your time. And are there any companies leading the way to develop Web 3.0, and which ones?
Yes, so I think the biggest one that comes to mind is Facebook, right? Which just changed its name to Meta. So it's a huge rebranding, a huge refocus for one of the world's largest companies. Virtual reality and the metaverse is definitely a Web 3.0 type of implementation, right? So it's kind of taking social media and social interactions to the next level. So that's one to keep your eye on. Also, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon, all these big tech companies have a significant research R&D into the Web 3.0 technologies, whether it's the metaverse or it's new self-driving car technology or new drone technology using faster internet speeds and all these things. I think those are the main companies. There's also, I'm sure, tons of startups trying to do different things with Web 3.0 tech.
Great, thank you. Where do you get your info to keep up with the crypto market? Is there a podcast or website, for example?
Yeah, so something like if an article appears in the New York Times or a really big national or the BBC, it must be a pretty significant piece of news, So I definitely look for those. I look out for those. If a major news outlet's reporting on something that's happening, it's probably pretty important. There's dozens and dozens of just smaller news outlets that only report on things happening in crypto. You could just Google like crypto news and you'll find these smaller outlets that are crypto specific. But again, they report on really tiny details that probably don't matter very much, or who knows if their reporting is even that accurate. They don't have really high standards. They're just there for the crypto community. So like I said, look for major news publications. If they have a story, something that's happening, that's good. I always think it's good to listen, not to just positive news about cryptocurrency, but also negative news, right? Like what are the people who just think it's a bad technology, what are they saying? And so an interesting lady who writes a blog I read recently is called Molly White. And so if you Google Molly White cryptocurrency, I'm sure you'll find her blog. She does not like it at all, and she's very vocal about the problems and all that. I think it's fascinating, and I agree with a lot of what she says. And I think that you should be well educated on both sides. So you could check that out, Molly White, and see what that side of the coin has to say about happenings in crypto.
Great. If an ERC20 token is created, which is technically a utility token, and is sold in an ICO for crowdfunding and continuing to build the blockchain company, would those transactions be considered money transactions or securities being sold?
Great question. ERC20 token is like the most common way to build on the Ethereum blockchain, but I don't know the answer to that. It has changed, right? So when ICOs were popular in 2017, people just thought, great, we can raise money and get around all the SEC regulations, but it didn't turn out to be so. And the SEC fined a lot of them. So currently what the status is of a ERC20 utility token launch and how the tax implications are, I don't know. So that's something to read up about, and maybe you could find a law firm that has really up-to-date information and is advising other people on that same topic. But there's so many aspects of the blockchain, I'm not as up-to-date on that one.
Great, thanks. That's all the questions we have for now. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here. Thank you everyone so much for attending today, and thank you for your awesome questions. You're all going to receive an email with a link to the recording and to the slides that we share today. If you'd like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. Be sure to check out our next digital bootcamp, Success Through E-commerce, on June 28th with Cameron. You can also access on our website the COVID Business Recovery Center, which we developed to help owners not only continue business operations, but to thrive and recover. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. Thank you all so much for attending, and I hope to see you at our next session.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.